Oh, how happy we'll be
when each wave comes a-rolling in.
We will duck or swim.
And we'll
Welcome to Our Lives, Our Future. And today we're interviewing a very special guest, the mayor of the city of Imperial Beach. And I want to thank you, Mayor, for being here with your busy schedule. And we hope to take your story and preserve it in history. We're doing these interviews in conjunction with the South Bay Historical Society, the City of Chula Vista, and the Chula Vista Heritage Museum, the Chula Vista Public Library.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So can we get started by finding out where you were born and where you grew up, when you came to the South Bay community, and places you were educated, both early on and later on in your higher education?
Yeah, sure. So I was born in 1964 in Los Angeles. I'm a first generation American. So my parents moved to Los Angeles from New York, but they were both immigrants. And so we then moved to Imperial Beach in 1971 in early September. In fact, it was this time of the year in this is September 4th today. So it was around that time in 1971. I'll never forget it. And my first day at the beach in Imperial Beach. I even remember we lived on Hemlock Avenue in Imperial Beach. And so I went to elementary school in the South Bay Union School District at Berry Elementary School, which is actually in San Diego. And I started out at Emory Elementary School, and then I finished my elementary education at Harborview Elementary, which is now Imperial Beach Charter School, and then attended Mar Vista Junior High. I graduated from Mar Vista High School in 1982. So I guess my 40th reunion is coming up. I was an undergrad, did my BA in political science at UC San Diego in 1987, and then ended up getting a master's degree in geography from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I think that was in 1991.
Did you ever happen to see Joy Zedler when you were at that university?
Well, I knew Joy from San Diego State. And so I think she made that move to Wisconsin right when I was finishing grad school or so. So in fact, yeah, she didn't make that move at Wisconsin probably to the mid 90s. Because I remember talking to her at San Diego State, I think it was around 1996 or 97. She's a guru in wetland conservation. Anything to do with, she was in Baja California. So yeah, really important person nationally for landscape conservation. And then, so finished Wisconsin, 1991, and then got a PhD at the University of Texas at Austin in geography. I think that was 1996 or so that I graduated. So I spent a long time in college. But in between that, I lived in El Salvador, Morocco, Spain, France, and England, I think, and then Peru. So spent probably like, I think quite a few years living abroad and studying abroad.
And you were also a lifeguard, and were you a surfer too, I heard?
Yeah, so I started surfing in 1977, always hung around the beach, but started surfing on July 1st, 1977 in Imperial Beach. And that really changed my life. And sort of my life's been centered around the ocean and studying the ocean, working in the ocean, working for the ocean, or living near the ocean. And now obviously being a mayor of a seaside or oceanside town. I worked as a lifeguard. I got my first job as a lifeguard in Imperial Beach in 1981. I was 17. I think I made 25 rescues my first day. And so we had a busy summer. Made a lot of rescues, really enjoyed being a lifeguard, and then switched to working for the state of California in 1985 and worked at the Silver Strand State Beach, where you get a lot of folks from all over the South Bay, just like IB, until 1993. So I worked eight years as a state guard. And I'm actually still compete in the state lifeguard championships and the national lifeguard championships, either as a member of the Imperial Beach team or the member of the state of California team. So I'm still very involved in lifeguarding. Both my sons, my youngest son is still working as a state lifeguard, and my oldest son was a state lifeguard. So anyway, so the beach and serving the ocean is something that's very important to me.
So when you were visiting all those different countries, was that during your youth or?
So we lived in my dad was a filmmaker and got his master's degree at San Diego State in film production. And so he ended up getting a job with USAID in El Salvador in 1974, right when he was finishing his graduate degree at San Diego State, where he worked with the famous Desi Arnaz of I Love Lucy fame, who was a professor there, who lives in Del Mar. Anyway, long story, but so we actually traveled to El Salvador in Central America in a van. We were the original hippie California family living in a van, and then spent a year in El Salvador, and then traveled all over Guatemala and Mexico. So that was a great experience for a 10-year-old. And then I did my senior year abroad in Spain in 1981, and then spent another year in Spain and Morocco and France during what would be my sophomore year of college. And then went to Peru in my senior year of college in 1985 to study. So it was all studying abroad. I really love traveling and surfing, and really wanted to get good at Spanish. And I learned, my dad's French, so I lived with my family in France when I was going to school there. So that was very nice experiences, and really have served me well as well.
Mm-hmm. So you were a founding director, the Northwest Mexico Program Manager for Nature Conservancy's Sea of Cortez program. Can you tell me a little bit about what you did for them and what that was?
Yeah, so my PhD work was on gray whale conservation in Baja California, and really about how conservation works. And I've been involved in environmental issues since I was a kid in Imperial Beach, and helped to save the Tijuana Estuary and South San Diego Bay as a national wildlife refuge. So a lot of experience and background in conservation, very involved in efforts to preserve the coastline in Imperial Beach. And so ended up getting a job right out of getting a PhD, starting this program in Baja California and the Gulf of California with the Nature Conservancy, which is a very large international conservation organization to help develop national parks. So that was developing infrastructure to actually make national park, or been paper parks that on a map into real parks. So that was involved working in a place called Cabo Pulmo, in Loreto Bay National Park, and off of La Paz called Isla Espiritu Santo, 3 globally important, gorgeous areas. Anyway, helping develop the park staff, helping get park equipment like boats and trucks. So it was a great job. But in 1999, a buddy of mine named Wallace J. Nichols, who's the author of a very, very popular book called The Blue Mind, and it's a sea turtle biologist, and we've decided to form our own nonprofit. It was the era of startups. 1999-2000 was a great era of Silicon Valley startups. So we decided to do our own startup, but a conservation organization, and we formed Wild Coast, and really starting in 2000. So, and I'm still the director. 20 years later, I'm still the director of Wild Coast.
So in 1988, you lobbied the Mexico government for San Ignacio Lagoon, help protecting and establishing the Vizcaino Biosphere Reserve to help the gray whales in their breeding. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so let me clarify that. Really starting really with Wild Coast, and even before that, there was a big campaign to preserve Laguna San Ignacio, or San Ignacio Lagoon, a UNESCO World Heritage Site in an area about 600 miles south of San Diego on the Pacific coast of Baja, where gray whales go to give birth. It's also a Mexican protected area. I think it's about 6.2 million acres, huge, vast area. And so there had been a proposal by the Mitsubishi Corporation of the giant industrial salt harvesting facility there. And I was part of a global, what became one of the largest international conservation campaigns ever. Pierce Brosnan, the Hollywood actor, was involved in it, and Glenn Close, the Hollywood actress. Very star-studded, big event campaign, but worked with the Natural Resources Defense Council, the International Fund for Animal Welfare, Greenpeace, and others to help stop that project and preserve the lagoon. And then after that, what Wild Coast worked on with a whole host of organizations, many involved in that campaign, was to actually make sure the lagoon was protected forever. So worked with a partnership with the Mexican government and local residents to protect about 500,000 acres of land permanently through a whole host of conservation concessions and easements. A real innovative project written up in the New York Times. So, and we're still working there to help protect that area. It's a globally unique area filled with wildlife. It's amazing. Sea turtles, there's pronghorn antelope on the northern shore. You know, it fills up with whales in the winter. It is literally like a National Geographic documentary, because National Geographic put it on their cover back in the 1980s.
So you mentioned Wild Coast, and you're the co-founder, started in 2000. Can you tell me about that organization, what they've done in the past, what their future outlook is for the future?
Yeah, so we started Wild Coast in 2000 with a mission to conserve coastal and marine ecosystems and wildlife. That mission today is to conserve coastal and marine ecosystems and to address climate change through natural climate solutions. Climate change really wasn't on the agenda when we started Wild Coast, but to date, we've helped preserve over 30 million acres of globally significant coastal and marine ecosystems and areas that are critical for absorbing carbon to address climate change, and then really critical wildlife habitats. Everything from some of the world's most important sea turtle nesting beaches to gray whale birthing lagoons to coral reefs, and to helping California establish a whole system of marine protected areas, which are wildly successful. So really, the initiatives have really been about protecting these globally important ecosystems we have along the coast of California and all the way down to the southern Mexican coast, all the way down to Chiapas in Mexico. So, you know, this week we had a team in the field putting buoys around to protect a coral reef in Oaxaca, the southernmost coral reef in Mexico, and then a team out protecting thousands of sea turtles that are nesting. So, as well as carrying out a campaign to stop people from poaching tide pools in San Diego County. So, we work in partnership with governments, with local communities, but very focused on really either developing protected areas or parks or helping manage them.
You mentioned when you were growing up in Imperial Beach, how you worked with the Tijuana estuary to help make it a national wildlife refuge. And you also worked in preserving the south part of San Diego Bay to make it a refuge. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so when we moved to Imperial Beach, we discovered the Tijuana estuary. It was a really great area, obviously heavily impacted by people, lots of human activity there. But, you know, my mom would just load up the kids on our bikes, and we just trekked down to the Tijuana estuary and spend the day there at the mouth of the Tijuana River with picnics and swimming and stuff. It was really a great childhood. My friend Mike and I would go down in the 6th grade and build forts from driftwood, you know, and roast marshmallows and hot dogs down there. So it was really great. But we quickly learned that the city of Imperial Beach, unfortunately back then, and other developers wanted to turn the whole thing into a marina and high-rise condominiums, a lot like Marina del Rey in LA. And so I worked with I was a young kid, and but my mom was really involved in it. But I grew up involved in this campaign and wrote my first letter about it, I think, to the paper when I was like 7 years old. And then so we finally in 1980, the President Reagan actually helped protect it as a national wildlife refuge. It's a pretty heavy experience. Imperial Beach wasn't a real friendly place to environmentalists back then. You know, I got beat up. You know, we did a cleanup, and, you know, the then mayor tried to have us arrested by the city of Imperial Beach police. So, you know, it was kind of a heavy era to be involved in Imperial Beach, but we were successful. And then later, really as a grad student, my wife and I, Emily, worked with, and there's a couple in Imperial Beach called Dr. Mike McCoy and Patricia McCoy. They're guru ecologists and environmentalists and conservationists, and they're really my conservation mentors. And they run an organization called the Southwest Wetlands Interpretive Association. And through them, we helped really set up the first effort to help set aside South San Diego Bay as a national wildlife refuge, which today is. And both areas of Tijuana Estuary and South San Diego Bay are wetlands of international importance. And I think the great thing about that effort, what it showed me, is that you can do conservation and you can still do economic development. I think it used to be that, you know, if you protected something, that somehow you lost something economically. But I think what we've seen around the south end of the bay is that, especially for Chula Vista and the South Bay and Imperial Beach and National City and Coronado, that thank God we protected these amazing, beautiful areas. We have 40,000 elegant terns in South San Diego Bay, and all kinds of wildlife in Tijuana Estuary, which is a challenge because of the pollution, but people enjoy them immensely. They add hugely to our quality of life, and we can have buffers and then develop it around them. So I think the future Chula Vista Convention Center is just an example of you can do nature conservation, economic development, and do it in a way that doesn't harm the environment. So that's something I really learned, I think, deeply in working, growing up in the South Bay and doing conservation in the South Bay, that I also learned in Mexico, that you have to figure out how to balance people's livelihoods and the ability to protect nature, and you can do both.
Since you've been mayor of Imperial Beach, your efforts have really paid off. There's a lot of beautiful restaurants, hotels. Imperial Beach is definitely one of the up-and-coming cities in the South Bay. Can you talk a little bit about the transformation, both from before and now that you're mayor?
Yeah, so, having grown up in Imperial Beach and having lived there since 71, and, and raised my kids there, I think what consistently I saw was, again, this pitted battle about, if we can't destroy the environment, then we can't grow economically. But also, and so there was efforts to build a breakwater off our coastline and then put a marina in the Tijuana Estuary and a marina even on South San Diego Bay, where the wildlife refuge is now, but ignoring all the other areas for development. So just consistently not investing in the area on Highway 75, not attracting, we lost a grocery store. We used to have a Safeway when I was a kid. So we were talking about the need to develop all this open space, or the city was, but at the same time, not actually doing any economic development, and then letting the city sort of fall apart. We kind of lost our swimming pool. We don't have a Parks and Rec department. Many of our neighborhoods are falling apart. We didn't have paved alleys and huge areas, swaths of the city, not safe streets, and the crime rate was really high. So, I really ran and started running in 2014 with a very simple platform. Let's invest back in Imperial Beach. Let's focus on putting neighborhoods and communities first. Let's focus on the basics, getting a grocery store, paving alleys, paving sidewalks, putting crosswalks on streets. Literally, I'm obsessed with crosswalks. Tearing down the chain link fences and empty lots. I'm sick of chain link fences and empty lots filled with garbage. We accept way too much blight in the South Bay. We accept way too many rundown streets. It's crazy that in South San Diego, there's still unpaved streets, right? So really a real strategic focus on let's get things done and make every neighborhood better. And so that obsession and focus on improving our streets from 13th Street to IB Boulevard, to Elm Avenue, and a lot of focus on safe route to school, making sure that kids can actually ride their bikes and walk to school safely and cross the street safely, really has permeated throughout the entire city. And that's also, and then really touting Imperial Beach as a cool place, right? The coolest little beach town around. And I think so far we've attracted over $200 million worth of investment. We have new hotels, new restaurants. But what we did was urban infill, right? We've a lot of empty lots got filled in, and I take great pride in tearing down chain link fences and turning quite a few empty lots into no-cost parks. And as we did that, Imperial Beach actually became the safest, lowest crime rate city in South San Diego County, and one of the lowest crime rate cities in all of San Diego County. And at one point, we were I think, second safest beach city in all of San Diego County. So we have less money, less resources, a much lower income population than Coronado, and yet for years since I've been there, we've had a lower crime rate than Coronado. Something I really take a lot of pride in, because that's consistent. What that meant is that every corner of Imperial Beach has received some attention, and people don't feel like they're neglected. And we've really focused on that sort of broken windows theory of city management, that I don't want to see any trash, I don't want to see any graffiti. I want to make sure everyone feels safe. Because when I was a kid, IB was not a safe area. Like, you had to have eyes in the back of your head if you were a little long-haired teenage surfer, because you may get beat up, or you're definitely gonna get hassled if you go to the pier, and that's not like that anymore. I love seeing the cheerleaders and from Mar Vista work, like training at the Mar Vista pier, because that wouldn't have happened when I was a kid. So So IB has undergone a significant transformation. We have a lot more to do. We don't have a Parks and Rec department like Chula Vista does. We don't have our own swimming pool like Chula Vista does, and National City does, and Coronado does. So we've got a lot more to do. We've got a senior center that's run down and totally inadequate for our folks. So those are I just want what I want to do is make sure that every resident in Imperial Beach has access to the same resources that everyone else does in San Diego County, right? Senior center, parks and rec departments, tennis courts, swimming pools, things that our residents have taken for granted that they don't have. They've accepted that, and that's not acceptable. And my feeling is, in this country, you shouldn't have to be a millionaire to have the same lifestyle as a millionaire, because if we have a great parks and rec department and great biking trails and hiking trails and a great grocery store and a quality of life, well, hey, we don't have a lot of money like we did when I was a kid. It shouldn't matter that much, right? We should have access to great schools, great resources, and a great, safe community. And so that's what we're trying to do in IB.
I really want to commend you for the work you're doing there and turning around the community to be a much safer place and a place where people can come from all over and enjoy. So recently we had a development over the last few days. It was announced by the chief of the EPA, Andrew Willer, and he mentioned some things that have been completed recently and some projects to help diverting 10 million gallons of wastewater per day for the South Bay International Wastewater Treatment Plant, and also trash and sediment capture at the facility at Smuggler's Gulch. Those are completed projects, and then he also announced upcoming projects. Can you comment about these developments?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people know that, we've had a sewage apocalypse or sewage tsunami just devastate Imperial Beach, but that's wiped out the beach for all of South County. Folks in Chula Vista, National City, South San Diego, east of us, all want to use our beach, right? And they should. We love to have them in our beach. And so literally the collapse of the sewer system in Tijuana, the lack of maintenance of the sewer system, what I call the sewage apocalypse. And literally from November of 2019, things have been bad for a while, but it got even worse. So we had between 50 to 100 million gallons of sewage going in the ocean every day. We've had literally this year alone in 2020, 160 days of closed beaches, pretty much every day of 2020 at the Imperial Beach Pier. And the southern part of our beach, which belongs to all Californians, in front of the Tijuana Estuary, has been closed all year, like literally every day, and it's still closed. So that's been horrible. And so we really had to push hard we got money allocated under the USMCA, their free trade agreement, thanks to all our congressional delegation and Senators Feinstein and Harris, to get money to build new sewage infrastructure treatment plant and on the US side of the border to capture flows that come through the river across the border. So that's being planned. And then in the meantime, we had to really push the EPA. And I say we, really, the coalition consists of Chula Vista Mayor Mary Salas, the Port of San Diego, our Port Commissioner Dan Malcolm, but the entire Port Commission has been amazing. City of Coronado, Mayor Bailey, San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulkner, the state of California, really have been the group leading, the local group leading, working with our congressional delegation to lead the effort to get fixes so that we wouldn't have closed beaches nonstop, which we've had for the last 9 months. So what they announced, just to be clear, they announced that they had fixed some broken pipes in Tijuana that were dumping 4.5 million gallons of sewage a day in the river. And then there were some new pumps that were put in. And then what you announced was that those are future fixes. They're gonna put in a trash capture basin at Smuggler's Gulch, and then they'll take additional 10 million gallons of water out of the river. I met with high-level officials from Mexico yesterday, and what they emphasize is if they fix their system, we don't have to spend that money. The only reason we have to spend this money is because Mexico has ignored its sewer system and knows that if they don't do anything about it, the US will give them money. So that's been the sort of balancing act, is really trying to push Mexico to make their own investments, but also, as I think San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulkner announced at this meeting with Andrew Wheeler, and as U.S. Ambassador of Mexico, Christopher Orlando announced as well, we have to control our own destiny. We want to make sure that we have the ability on the U.S. side of the border to capture sewage flows, so they don't, we don't depend on some bureaucrat in Mexico making a decision about whether or not they're going to put people to work fixing a sewer pipe. Because what would happen is sewer pipe breaks on a Friday afternoon or a sewer pump station, and then everyone goes home. And it may be a holiday weekend, and on Tuesday or Wednesday they come back and say it takes them 2 days to look at it, and then maybe 2 weeks later it's fixed. And that will lead consistently. That what would happen every other week, every every month, in the winter, especially when it rains. And so then all of a sudden, our beach has been closed for 6 months. It's completely crazy. So, so we're on the process now of pushing everybody. I was in an interview today from Tijuana, and they made it really clear a lot of people in Mexico are really mad at me, that I've been really mean. And I was like, I only answer to my constituents, right? That's the only people I answer to. And, can you really blame me? Yeah, we've had it's hard to describe how bad it was this year, that the smells were so bad that people were getting sick inside their homes, like in South San Diego. It's really awful. I get calls from people that have immune system issues. In fact, I think people were suffering more from this than they were from COVID and economic crisis. It was so bad. So right when COVID hit, there was a horrible collapse of the sewer system as well. And it was just it was the worst thing ever. I think people in IB were really, really suffering, as well as people in South San Diego. So anyway, so I'll do whatever it takes to get clean water. It's the most important thing. And that goes hand in hand with my commitment to making sure everybody has access to high quality of life. The beach is free. And, I grew up on the beach, right? My entire childhood was on the beach. It didn't cost us a dime. And, and Mary Salas, said this, I think her parents asked each other to get married on the pier. Like that, the beaches have a really emotional, importance for people. Like people really have an emotional connection to place. And so, I want to make sure that someone from National City or Chula Vista or whatever, or South San Diego, they just want to go to the beach and walk on the pier and see the sunset, right? Hold their wife's hand. That may sound really like nothing, but we've now known with COVID, that's the most important thing. People want to connect with each other, connect with nature, and just be themselves and not have to worry about anything. And so the fact that you've got a major stretch of beach that's been closed to people and it makes them sick is an offense against nature. It's the worst thing that can possibly happen. And that's the misplaced priorities a society has, where we prioritize people's profits over public health, is just absolutely misguided. We have to put people first. And that's why I will do whatever it takes to make sure that everyone has access to our really cool beach.
Also, the EPA has a stance not recognizing climate change being caused by fossil fuels. And also they've weakened and rolled back basic environmental protections. Can you speak to that perhaps?
Well, yeah, look, climate change is devastating the planet. Climate change is devastating California. Climate change is having a significant impact on everything, right? That's why the city of Imperial Beach filed a lawsuit, was the first city in the world to file a lawsuit against 36 of the world's largest fossil fuel companies for causing climate change. That's a lawsuit that's been joined by Boulder, Baltimore, the state of Rhode Island, Marin County, San Mateo County, and cities actually across the country now. A lot more cities you're seeing are suing fossil fuel companies for causing climate change. So, whether or not someone believes in climate change, it's happening. And so that's why it's really important for cities like Imperial Beach and Chula Vista and National City, San Diego, to do everything they can to mitigate climate change, have a clean environment, right? And then also preserve open space that helps to absorb carbon. So all these wetlands that we have and seagrass beds in South San Diego Bay, they actually sequester carbon. So that's really good for the planet. All the open space in Chula Vista that surrounds us, that was preserved back in the 70s and actually in the 80s, these open space preserves, those sequester carbon. So that's a good thing. And it's interesting to see a city like Chula Vista and then even San Diego have been climate leaders nationally for a long time. The city of Chula Vista, I was on their climate committee, I think back in 10 years ago, right? And so that's really good. It's really great to have seen the leadership on these issues. And because you can say all you want about climate change not happening, it's happening. Anyone who goes outside knows it. So, you have to work with everybody when you're in government, whether it's the EPA or, the Trump administration or the Mexican government who's terrible on climate. And so you just have to do what you do to keep moving forward.
Also, I want to mention about turtles. We have turtles in our bay. And this is an article you did from 2002, where you talked about the turtles, not only in our bay, but up and down the California's coast. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I can't remember when, I think it was a lifeguard, I learned about these incredible sea turtles, big giant sea turtles in South Chula Vista, right off J Street and the old power plant. And apparently, in theory, they were coming because they were attracted to the warm water being discharged from power plant. And that is true. On the other hand, there probably always were sea turtles in San Diego Bay. In fact, there also had been sea turtles imported into San Diego Bay and Chula Vista to be used as meat back, I think it was like in the early 1900s. And I've seen those photos. I'm not sure if it's the Chula Vista Historical Society or the San Diego Historical Society. So, Wild Coast has always had an active sea turtle conservation program. And so we started working with a lot of the biologists that are studying the sea turtles in Chula Vista. Great group of people. And then also that work with the National Marine Fisheries Service and NOAA. And so that was important because those were turtles that were coming from Mexico. And in Mexico, they were being slaughtered by the tens of thousands. That's something my wife and I had discovered in Baja when we were doing our PhD work. And then I connected with Wallace J. Nichols, who was a sea turtle biologist, to help me start Wild Coast. And so we helped do a whole campaign to stop people from eating sea turtles. So that was interesting because even people from San Diego were going to Tijuana and eating sea turtle meat. Like I actually had a former high-level official in Mexico. He was surprised he wasn't allowed to eat sea turtle meat. So that was happening less than 20 years ago. So that was a really cool effort. So having those turtles in San Diego Bay was cool. And the thing is, we helped stop the slaughter of sea turtles in Mexico, and they've really come back. They're not just in San Diego Bay anymore. I was surfing in Solana Beach recently and saw a turtle pop its head out of the water because they're feeding on seagrass beds. There's sea turtles all over La Jolla. And I've even seen them still paddling. I love paddling in South Chula Vista, south end of the bay, and you can see turtles pop up. So it just shows how vibrant South San Diego Bay is and how lucky we are in the South Bay to have access to these world-class resources. I walk along the bay just about every morning. It's my pandemic escape with my wife. And, it's a remarkable ecosystem. And the beauty watching the sunrise over Otay Mountain, and these osprey, and there's dolphins, and there's beautiful birds, elegant terns, and it's insane how nice it is. And paddling, you go out paddling in the morning and there's no one around. So or fishermen fishing. So we're really lucky in the South Bay. But historically we ignored our access points to open space, and I think that's changing. We're realizing that we need to really have a much more vibrant waterfront that provides for people and nature as well.
So we're having a lot of development in the south part of San Diego Bay. And that's a place where the turtles do still like to hang out because of the eelgrass beds and also a little warmer water in the south part of the bay. So with the advent of more people and more jet skis, boats, and things like that, we're coming more and more in contact with hits on the turtles. So do you have any solutions, or can you think of anything that would help protect these turtles more?
There hasn't been, I don't think there's been a lot of mortality. I think there's been some mortality, but the biggest threat to sea turtles really isn't from ship strikes, at least. It's really from people catching them in nets. That's the single biggest, and then from pollution, especially in Hawaii, where they have these tumors. So I'm not too worried about ship traffic in San Diego Bay and sea turtles. I'm more worried about pollution, the impacts from pollution, and then really poaching and the directed take of turtles the minute they cross into Mexico, and then they hit these long lines and gill nets. That's the biggest threat to sea turtles. So there's been a significant effort at removing gill nets off the California coast. There's been more effort at stopping the directed take of sea turtles for the turtle trade, and then protecting egg nesting beaches, and that's why you've seen sea turtles come back. So I think ultimately, there's some no boating areas and no fishing areas in South San Diego Bay. I think that's where you see a lot of the sea turtles. And so I think what you're going to continue to see turtles hang out in that area. Overall, I think the Fish and Wildlife Service and other agencies have done a pretty good job of managing South San, and the port have done a pretty good job managing San Diego Bay. The key to protecting sea turtles and all the species in South San Diego Bay, the bay, is really restoring these ecosystems. So restoring more eelgrass beds. The port's going to be restoring 80 acres in Pond 20 at the south end, the very end of the bay next to the wildlife refuge. So I think you'd see a lot more innovative projects on restoration and really bringing back the ecosystem functionality and health of the bay. So I'm actually pretty optimistic about how we can continue to protect the Bay. And the key thing is to help protect the Otay River watershed, the Sweetwater River watershed, like all these watersheds, Trace Creek. Folks in National City, they're working at Trace Creek and Paradise Creek are awesome. So I think that's the key, is like linking really the riparian and wetland restoration efforts. And that's going to really help protect the Bay. And then I'm actually surprised a lot. I think there's key times when there's a lot of boat traffic, but it's interesting to see how empty the Bay is a lot. Like that, there's a lot less activity, I think, generally most of the year than you'd think, at least, especially in the South Bay.
So Imperial Beach has the bikeway going along it, and they have refurbished salt ponds 10 and 11 for the viewing of the public along those refuge and wetlands. Can you talk about how they've been a bonus for the people in Imperial Beach to be able to have that to view?
Yeah, well, the whole revitalization of the Bayfront and the Bayshore Bikeway has been a huge success. So, we did what's called Bikeway Village at the end of 13th Street, which was a coffee shop and a bike store there. And it's a viewing platform. It's really beautiful. And then I was talking about putting a hotel there, as well as the Bayshore Bikeway. And then there's been a new trail opened by the Fish and Wildlife Service. Remarkable area, really, really well used by people, walkers. And I love seeing moms with their strollers and dads with their strollers and grandparents. It's people on bikes. All the cyclists are whizzing by. So it's a really, really well used place. And people love, I love, there's a place where kids can get binoculars during like Refuge Day, and these little kids come out and watch birds. So it's a really, really remarkably beautiful place. And I think we can do even more. So we just did some landscape restoration on Ivy Boulevard right next to the beach. We put a big, beautiful like viewing platform onto the estuary. So we'd love to do that, do much more of that kind of work, landscape sort of design on the south end of the Bay, make it even nicer. We've got our public works yard right on the Bay. It's it's the most blighted property in Imperial Beach. We'd love to get rid of that and move it somewhere else. So there's a lot of opportunities to make it even nicer. And that goes hand in hand with the rest of the Bay as you get to Palomar and Main Street, which, frankly, the Bay has been treated as a garbage dump. It's awful. I mean, it looks terrible, right? I mean, we got rid of the old gas plant, the SDG&E plant, but we've got to do a lot more to make it nicer. And I think, Mary Salas and Mary Chula Vista, and I know Alejandro Sotelo Solis, Vivian Moreno, and Greg Cox and I all share that vision, right? Like we need to radically, significantly improve that area. And I think the convention center process took a long time. That was due to the Environmental Health Coalition and the City of Chula Vista and the Port of San Diego. People working together. It took decades to do, but I think that's going to make that area a lot nicer and then help improve the area between it and Imperial Beach. One of the things I'm obsessed with is along the causeway from Imperial Beach to San Diego and Chula Vista, they have giant black chain link fences up. I'm not sure why you put fences up to keep people from seeing nature. Like I told the refuge managers, we got to knock down those fences. And that's one of the things you start really noticing around South San Diego Bay and the South Bay is this proliferation of chain link fences. It ends up looking like a prison camp. Like I don't know why we're so obsessed with fencing everything off, and it really mars this gorgeous landscape. So there's a lot more we can do. I think we tend to accept blight as normal in South San Diego, in the whole South Bay, and that's unacceptable. We just let these areas go because they've always been like that, and that's one of the things I wanted to change in IB, like where we just we don't accept the status quo anymore. We really and find innovative ways to change things quickly and not take decades to make change.
Well, upcoming in November, we have a presidential race where it's possible that the president could become Joe Biden, and he would have a vice president of Kamala Harris. And that would leave a spot open for a senator, representative for our Congress, United States Congress. And I've heard that you possibly are interested in that position. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, sure. So when Kamala Harris immediately got the nod to be the candidate for vice president, and she's, may lose, I decided to put my name in the ring because I thought, why not? why shouldn't we have a small town mayor who's, is going to put climate first and want to clean up California? And so, whatever that means in terms of a campaign and non-campaign, since it's a little bit of an odd process, but I think it's important to get the message out about climate change. I think it's important to have someone who wants to be a U.S. senator and represent our amazing state, who's going to put California and our climate first, right? Who understands that if we don't address climate change, the number one existential threat that we have to our planet and all of our livelihoods and lives, then we're not going to move forward as a nation, right? And so, and a planet and a society. So that's sort of my message. And I also thought that I think it's important to recognize that hierarchy and the old rules no longer matter. Whatever happened pre-COVID is almost irrelevant, because what we've seen is the folks that are leading our societies have done a pretty bad job of it. They've actually just pretty much wrecked everything. They wrecked public health, they wrecked the economy, and they're wrecking the planet. And so, people will say, "Oh, well, you run a small town," but we've got a lot done in Imperial Beach. We know how to get things done. We know how to work with people, and so that's my commitment. And it's been fun having that platform.
I wish you success if you end up being a senator in Congress. Yeah, I think you'd be a real good one. So I've followed your career throughout the years. I've known about you and have contacted with you throughout the years. And I think you're an incredible person. You have a lot to offer, not only the Imperial Beach community, but the South Bay community, of course, and even our country. So I just want to let you know we support you and we wish you the best. And I wish the best for your city and your family. And I want to thank you very much for being here today. I know you've had many awards throughout your career, and many establishments of our community have really looked up to you and your leadership. I want to thank you very much.
I think I really enjoy the role that local history organizations play in reminding us what we where we were and then where we're going. I think it's really important. Actually, I know my own career and even education, I use the resources of the Chula Vista Historical Society, the historical resources at the local libraries. Like that has been really important to me. And I have vivid memories of talking to some of the oldest living residents in the South Bay about their experience with nature. I got paid to do that in one of my first jobs out of college. And so this type of work and the role of historical associations and societies is really critical for, helping us remind us of who we are, right? So thank you for doing it.
Oh, you're welcome. And by the way, I want to mention we have our exhibit in the.
Oh, right, I have to check that out, right?
Right. Remember Us, the Holocaust. And it'll be open again soon, hopefully, as the library opens. And we want to thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for watching the interview. And thank you, Mayor Serge Dedina. Very much honored to have you on today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
By the sea,
By the sea,
by the beautiful sea,
you and me, oh how happy we'll be.
when each wave comes a-rolling in,
We will duck or swim,
and we'll float and fool around the water,
over and under.
and then up for air.
Pa is rich,
Ma is rich.
so now what do we care?
I love to be beside your side.
Beside the sea, beside the seaside.